In this video, we're going to explore the different text functions within GIMP, and I'll do that by creating a project, and that is I'm just going to make a poster. So I'm going to come up into File, New, and I want to change this to Images, and I'm going to go ahead and make it 18 inches wide by 24 inches tall, and we have Portrait selected. Under Advanced Options, since I'm going to be printing this, I'm going to go to 240 pixels per inch, RGB color, of course. Background color can be white. So when I click OK, I get this error message. And I set my preferences down so that I would. And that's okay, because at this point we can just cancel and then come into our preferences and bump them up if you haven't already. It's under the environment heading. I've got mine currently set to 35 undos. I do a lot of undoing, as you know by now. Maximum undo memory, 524 megabytes. That's fine. This is all dependent upon how much RAM you have in your computer. And I've got 32 gigabytes of RAM. Now, if you're working on a laptop with just 4 gigabytes, you might have to set that down. If you have so many pixels that GIMP starts to run out of RAM, then that's where you have your tile cache size. So it allows you to work with really big images. I've got mine set to 8 gigabytes. But if you only have 4 gigabytes of RAM in your computer, you might just set this to 1. Maximum new image size. This is where I ran into trouble in creating this new image. I have 10 megabytes. I'm going to go ahead and bump that up to 2 gigabytes. Now a 2 gigabyte image is going to run real slow on just about any computer, including mine. But it just keeps me from getting a warning message. And then the number of processors to use doesn't really matter what you select, because GIMP is just going to use one processor anyways. And let's see, I guess the rest of that looks okay. So now when I say OK, so my new image opens up without an error. I now have my 18 by 24 inch canvas that I can start my poster on. Now GIMP will use any of the fonts that are already installed on your computer, but to be honest, they're a little bit boring. They're mostly for just doing word processing. So when I want something just a little bit more dramatic, something a little more stylish, especially whenever I make a poster, I typically go to dafont.com. Dafont.com has I don't know how many thousands of free fonts that you can download. And so let's see if we can find one. I'm going to go ahead and come into Comic, and I think I'm going to choose this Adventure font. So I just come over and I download it. Doesn't matter where you save it. And then I'll just go ahead and go through the process of installing it. When I come to extract it, and when I right click on the font, just go ahead and install it. Same with Adventure Hollow. Just go ahead and install that as well. And so then now that they're installed, let's go back to GIMP. By the way, I had to restart GIMP so that it would load the new fonts into GIMP. The text tools right over here, it's capital letter A. We can, down in Tool Options, select all the different fonts that are available in our computer system. If you don't want to scroll through all of those, if you know one like, say, Arial, if you start typing in, there we go, you can select it quickly. Here we can choose the size, change it from pixels to inches to points, whatever you want. But I'm just going to stick with pixels. By the way, this poster is about 6,000 pixels tall, so we're going to need a font much bigger than 18. And let's see, here's where you can pick your color. Basically, it just chooses the foreground color. So you can click either place to select it. Here you can justify, left, right, center, etc. And then we'll diddle with these guys down here just a little bit later. So go ahead and put text on our page. Start with the text command or the text tool. We come down into our tool options. We pick a font, like say Georgia. Let's start with an initial size of say about 200. And then come over and left click and drag and put in a box. Doesn't really matter what size you select initially because you can change it at any time. And then when we come in and type in the word open. I want it a little bit bigger, so I'm going to highlight the text just like I normally would. And let's see, let's try 500. I want it even bigger, so let's try 1000. If we want to change the color, we can right in here. It's nice to have this handy little toolbox. If we want to change the font itself, sometimes I have a little bit of trouble doing that within GIMP, but let's see. I downloaded a font called Fat Font. That's what I want to use. Oh, there it started to pop up, didn't it? So that's good. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes I have to go back over into the tool options and do it. And I'm going to make it bold, just to give myself a little fatter letters. Once that's created, you'll notice a couple of things. One is that over here in the Layers tab, it created a separate layer for us and titled it using the first few characters or the first line sometimes of whatever you happen to type. So that's actually separate. That's not on the background here. You can take that and with it selected, you can move it wherever you want. You can take and rotate it just pretty much like any element. And I'm going to rotate this 30 degrees, except I want it to be the other direction. So I'm going to go back -60 to take it back to horizontal and then go the other way. Oh, that's not right. I guess I just want to make it -30. Sometimes I get my CAD work confused with what GIMP and other programs do. Before I close out here, there's just a couple more things I want to do here, planning ahead. I can come in and edit my text. It's interesting. So it undid the rotation there. So, but I want to take this letter and just make it a different color. And I'm going to take the N and make it a different color. Doesn't really matter what color at this point because I'm going to be changing them in a little bit. And then I'm going to select the entire word and I'm going to come over here in the tool options, and this button right here allows me to adjust the letter spacing. So I can expand it out, but I'm coming the other way. I want them to overlap just a touch, so we'll just make that an even -80 degrees. Make a note of that so we can do the same thing with the next word. And now I'll take and rotate this -30 degrees again. And the word open is done for now. So now I'm going to put in the word house. Again, text tool. Doesn't really matter where I draw my box. This one will go a little bit quicker. And I want Fat Boy font, or fat font. There we go. And go ahead and click in here and type in the word house. Not sure why I got that message. What I'm going to do to fix that is I'm just going to try putting it in at 200 pixels. Wow, now that cursor is enormous. Nope, but it looks okay. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but let's go. Oh, there it came back. Ah, okay, so what I've got is just a whole bunch of things selected there. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit escape and then undo that. And let's try that again with just 200. So draw that in there, choose the word house. It's all kerned together at -80, so let's change that back to 0. That might have been part of the problem too. There we go. So now let's bump that up to 1,000. I'm just leaving these mistakes in because stuff happens. And let's try again, fat font. And now let's take and change the color of every other letter. And make that one red. We'll say OK. And then I'm going to select rotate, choose that, -30 degrees. Call that good, and I'm going to save it as to text so I can come back if I want. So if I lose this work for some reason, I'm not in too much trouble. But I just discovered, looking at it, that I made a mission, not what I'd call a mistake, but I need to come in and edit this again, and it's going to tell me, yeah, I lose those transformation tools, but I'm going to forgot to make this bold, and then I want to take and make this -80 to smush them together. And now I'll rotate, select it, -30. And now I'll take and save that, and we'll move on to the next step. So I've moved my words to where I want them on my poster, and now I want to further refine the words open house. I like the fact that they're on separate layers, but I can make a little quicker work of this if I put the two words on the same layer. However, I want to be able to go back in case I change my mind about something. So I'm going to take the house layer and duplicate it, and the open layer and duplicate it. And then I'm just going to hide them. I'm going to move them down to the bottom. And then I'm going to come up to my house layer here, right click, and merge it down. So I've now got both words on the same layer. I'm going to rename this so I don't get terribly confused. Now, what's coming up next is completely new in that we're going to be combining text and paths. Paths you might remember from Larry the Bird, where we traced him, or traced the outline of his body, using the path tool. But we don't have to go in and trace these individually. That would be just a heck of a lot of work. So what I'm going to do is select the red letters. And I'm going to use the color selector. Right now the threshold's set there. Let's see what we get when we select red. And that worked. So now with the red letters selected, I'm going to go to the Paths tab. Right now there's nothing in it. If you're missing your Paths tab, you can come into this little triangle here. Choose to add a tab and select Paths, and that'll dock it right up here with the others. With these pixels selected, now I'm going to come down here to the button bar, and the one icon that's highlighted, it's not grayed out, is selection to path. When I click on that, it grinds for a moment, and it makes a selection of these letters. In other words, I just converted these marching ants into paths. If I double click on this little icon, There's the familiar path symbols, the anchor points, etc. I can edit this if I want to, just like any other path, so I can grab and pull that out and grab a handle grip here and stretch it. But I don't want to do any of that. Just letting you know that it's there if you want to. I've still got, if I come back into my layers, I've still got the text. It's still there. But I've converted this into paths. So now I'm going to come in here, and I'm just going to call this red letters for now. Okay, we're going to repeat the same process here now with the word house. Let's go ahead and use the color selector again. Threshold set to about 150. And that pretty much selects all the black letters, but I've got some pixels selected in there as well. So that's not as clean as I would like. So let's crank the threshold down here so it doesn't jump. It's still too much. I really have to crank it down. There we go. That picked the letter P cleanly. Now I'm going to select the little button here that allows me to just add to the current selection. And that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to come back over into my Paths tab. I am going to convert that selection to a path, or not really convert it, but just create a path from that selection. I'm going to call it black letters. I'm going to come back into my layers, and I'm going to turn off the open house layer. I just noticed that I have a few marching ants kind of out here or outside the selections that I thought I had made. So let's just take and make a quick mask of this. I don't see any white spots. So what I'm going to do here is just go ahead and use my paintbrush tool. And let's see if I can paint them away. I don't think they're going to really affect too much. I'm going to go to hard brush because I missed that. I'll make that just a little bit quicker. Okay, and that got rid of those. So let's go to smaller brush and finish cleaning this up. See, I've got some here, got some there, and up here. So just do that. Let's try to do that all at once. And that looks pretty good. So let's move on to the next step, and you can see why I chose to convert these selections and the text to paths. Instead of red and black, I want to fill these letters with a pattern. That's part of why I chose to work with paths. Now I'm the first to admit I'm not very good at design, so I went to Google and looked at some different color combinations. And I liked this one, so I saved the JPEG. So with this image opened separately, I'm now going to come in and use my rectangle select tool to grab a sample here. The size doesn't matter, a whole bunch. I'm going to go Control-C, copy, and then up under Edit, I'm going to paste this as a new pattern. It asks me to name it, so I'll name it Brownwood. And when I do that, there it is right there, down in my palette. Do that one more time. Grab a selection here, Control-C or Command-C to copy. And then if I'm lazy, I can just right-click as well. Come to the context menu, paste as, new pattern. I'll call this Magenta Wood. And by the way, these the file name here is where it's putting it in my profile. I'm watching it populate as I do this, so it's naming it pattern 17, pattern 18. And these patterns are located on your C drive, in your profile, in your .gimp 2.8. So I'm going to pause here. I'm going to finish populating my patterns and then we'll put them to use. So coming back into my poster, you can see that I've still got the words open house here, but I'm just going to turn off the visibility of the text. I could actually delete that layer now because I have my paths. I don't actually need the pixelated letters anymore. I'm going to turn on the visibility for the black letters. That is the paths. I'm going to right click, choose to activate that path as a selection. Come back into my layers here, come back into the background layer, which is the only visible one. Choose my bucket tool, and I'm going to start with, I guess, the brown wood. And there we go. I'll repeat that for the red letters by choosing the red letters here, right click, and send that path as a selection. Again, bucket tool, and what would go good with that? Let's try the magenta. Now I want to mention again at this point that the only way that you can get a pattern like this quickly inside your letters is by using paths. Because when you use the text tool, you just have a choice of colors. Can't use patterns. So let's talk about one more thing that you can do with this that you can't do otherwise. And wait a second, what do we got going on here? Oh, okay. Remember those extra marching ants that we had in the past? Let's see if they're down here on the O. Remember them being down there. Yeah, okay. Those are extra anchor points. So let's go clean those up. So I'm going to double click on black lines here. And there's my anchor points, which doesn't show us a lot at this time. I'm going to turn off the background so I'm looking just at them. And I must have had something selected there when I converted it to paths. So let's come into edit here, hold down the shift key, and delete those. Oh, wrong key. I held down the control key. So I was adding. This might take just a little bit. Probably going to pause here. Looks like it did some. Just some extra points. So we can get rid of those. Well, that was a little bit of a mess I made for myself. When I come in and look at all the different control points or anchor points that I have on these letters, I started to think about how in the world I got so many. And I'm sure that what it came down to was that I started with such enormous letters to begin with, being 1,000 pixels tall. If I was to do this again, I would take and write the word open and then write the word house, but maybe only make it 150 pixels tall, convert it to a path, and then scale up the path rather than trying to apply a path to such large letters. So now I'm going to come in and add what's called stroke. And it looks like there's a stroke going around the edge of the letters, but that's just the path. So what I want to do, and it's really quite simple, I'm going to start with my black letters and choose stroke path. Now, when it comes in, I have my choice of a solid color, which in this case would be red. It just picks the foreground color. So if you want a green, change it before you apply the path. But I'm going to use a pattern, and I've been doing some of this before. So I'll just point out that I selected wood down here, this blue wood, and I bumped it up to 50 pixels. GIMP is just going to remember whatever value you used the last time. But remember, these letters are 300 pixels tall. I'm going to come into my line style. I am going to choose a cap styles where the line ends, but I've got join styles, and so I'm going to pick a round corner. And then make sure that, in this case, I've got a solid line chosen. You can see some of the other choices you have, dots, dashes. And I think that's good, so now I'm going to finally apply my stroke. And I like that. I like that a lot. So now I'm going to go to the red letters. Right click. Stroke the path. And this time I'm going to pick a different pattern. Something I haven't used yet. Guess I haven't used the green, have I? Let's see what that looks like. If we don't like it, we just do an undo and apply the stroke again. Yeah, and those colors complement each other. Now these, again, these little red lines that you see in here, and this blue line over here, those are just the paths. And I'll just go ahead and turn off the visibility so we can see what we have so far. By the way, if you do like a small colored line inside of there, I can come in again, like on the black letters, which are now the ones that are surrounded in green. Right click, stroke path, turn it down to maybe 10 pixels, pick a solid color. I'll pick black. And when I apply the stroke, oh, wrong foreground color. So let's undo that. Let's flip those guys. Again, apply the stroke. And there we go. Adds a little more definition. I think I'm going to do the same thing to the green. I don't think that looks too busy, and it does help separate the letters. So that was a lot of heavy lifting. We certainly covered a lot of territory, considering we started off with just the basic font tool and worked our way up through adding patterns, adding stroke, and converting to a path, etc. But now I'm just going to finish off the poster with plain text. I'm going to switch my font to something that's a little more complementary and comes with Windows. Start with Gill Sans MT Bold. And let's see, I think I'm going to go for about 300. And for a color, I'm going to pick a color that already exists, but rather than guess, I'll use the eyedropper tool and click up here in my purple or magenta wood, whichever one I used. Then I'll come down and draw my box and do some typing. And let's see here. I'll put in some returns. So with that in place, and with my new layer created right up here, I'm going to go ahead and not move, but rotate. And I'm going to slide this, see which direction I want to go, and I want it to be perpendicular to the word house. So that looks like 60 degrees to me. Click rotate. Then I'll move it into place. And if I click anywhere inside this box, and I do this all the time, see, it wants to move the layer. So you actually have to be on the text. Oh, missed it again. So let's zoom in a little bit here. And now we can move it over. Zoom out a little, see how that looks. All of this is adjustable later on. And there we've added an element. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here and add some more, and then I'll be back. So I've gone through and added a couple more text elements, and now I'm going to come in and add a circle. I'm going to make sure that the fixed aspect ratio is 1:1. That will make it circular, although I suppose I could add an ellipse too. Pull it out about that size, and I'm going to come in to paths again, and I'm going to create a path from the selection, and then I'm going to come up and stroke that path, and let's see, over here that was about 50, so let's make this, well, let's just make it 40. Let's see how that looks. Solid color, let's choose the eyedropper again, and we'll pick this color here, and then we'll go ahead and stroke it. And I think you can see that it did add the stroke. So now while that's still selected, I am going to pick a different color, and this time I'm just gonna pick a yellow. And then come in here, right click. I could use the bucket tool here, but just to show you something different, I'm going to fill it with the foreground color, and you can see that it even gives you a little preview of what it's going to be. And then we'll come up, select none. Oh, what happened to my stroke? I see what happened. Okay, so I went back, did a couple of undos, and when I added the fill, it covered up the stroke. So now let's take and use the fuzzy select tool just to click inside, and now we'll fill with foreground color, and there we go. That looks a lot better. Okay, now that we got that fixed, I'm going to come in and draw another text box, and this time when I do it, I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to sizing it here. So I basically wanted to be inside this area of the circle. There we go, that looks pretty good. Pick a text color. Or actually, I just click down here because something that always works. And again, I think I'm going to pick the same color as my stroke, so I'll just choose right there, and then I'm going to start typing. Oop, I still have it yellow. I have to click OK. There we go. And then I'll highlight that text and bump up its size. And then let's go ahead and move that, nudge that over just a touch. And that element is done. So at this point, I want to take and add a couple more of these circle elements. So I'm going to go to my background layer and select the yellow part. Hold down the Shift key and grab the stroke as well. I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to paste it as a new layer, and edit, paste it as a new layer. So I have my original circle, and I've got this one. Let's see which one that is. That's that one there, so I'm just going to call it circle 2. We'll call that circle 3. And then I'll go ahead and edit. So I'll just come in, use the fuzzy select tool to select the inside. Then I will use the eyedropper tool to maybe pick the green. And now that's my foreground color. So edit, fill with foreground color. And I can do the same thing up here. And I can also select the stroke and change those colors. And then if I want to make a little bit quicker work, I can select this text and I can duplicate that layer and then move the text element over here, change its color, edit the font, and be just that much closer to finishing. So at this point, really the only thing left to do is probably add a colored background or maybe a border if we wanted to do that. Now your first inclination might be to come in and erase, but that doesn't work because there aren't any pixels here. Even if we select none, there are no pixels up here. There is down here, but up here there isn't. And this white background was what we created when we made a new document and chose a background color of white. Now I did that for you because it's a lot easier to see if it's white than if it's transparent. But there comes a time when we might not want white, and so let's talk about how we can go ahead and erase the background, so to speak. With all the other layers turned off here, I'm going to take and add an alpha layer. Alpha channel. There we go. Now it doesn't look like anything happened, but now when I come in and erase, I can actually erase the background. Now that's not the way I want to do it in terms of actually erasing. So let's use the select tools we have. I'm going to start with the fuzzy select tool. And I'm going to grab this area and just delete it. And then pick inside there. Okay, that looks pretty good. I could also cut this, and I think I actually will here. Just going to take the free select tool and select around here. And I'm going to cut that, and then I'm going to paste those words as a new layer. So there it is there. I'm going to have to move it back into position. So let's go ahead at this time and turn all the other layers back on. There's our original text there. We could delete that layer again if we wanted to. And let's see here. So then we'll come back into our clipboard, which I'm going to rename Open House. And then I'm going to move it back down into position. There we go. Now it looks like up here, maybe when I was doing some diddling, I nipped away a little bit of the Brigands logo, so I'll have to replace that, but I won't do that at this time. So now our background is just basically blank, isn't it? So let's go in there now and select all. Just go Control A, use the paint bucket tool, and I'm going to put in a pattern fill here. I'm not going to put in the pattern fill. Let's see, I want something much lighter. So I'll pick that marble and paint it in place. So that looks pretty good. Certainly better than a white background. But if I come in and look at it closely, I can see that tiling. And GIMP does a pretty good job of tiling it and mixing it up and randomizing each of those patterns. If you look carefully, you can see how it's kind of rotated and jumps around. But in any event, let's go ahead and try a couple of different things. So the first thing that I'm going to try to do is just come in and scale this background. And I'll just pull it out some, because then I won't have as many tiles. And that helps some, but we still have that tiling effect. So let's try dabbling in some of the filters. Let's go in and apply a Gaussian blur. And you can try any of these filters that you want. There are so many of them, and they all do different things, and just depends upon what you want. But let's just pick a representative piece there. And we'll ratchet this down to 0, and then we'll just start to take it up. Just want to get to a point where I can't really see that grid of lines. And that's probably pretty good. So we'll say OK. And it'll grind for a moment while the blur is applied. I do this with watercolors too. I'll go online and just find a watercolor of almost anything because they have subtle pastel colors, and when you apply some different filters to them, it doesn't look like a watercolor anymore, but it's a pleasing background. So let's again hit this with it. Let's see, which one should we try now? Let's go to distorts. And there's a whole bunch of them here. And again, I encourage you to just play with them. Let's try this swirl and pinch one. So again, I'm just going to pull these sliders down. And then looks like we're zoomed all the way out. So let's zoom in some. And okay, we're at the center. So we've got a fairly good representation of what it looks like. That is, my preview is the same as the background that I can view up there. So let's apply some whirl to it. Doesn't look like that changed much. Let's pinch it. Okay, let's crank up the radius. Ah, there we go. So now let's take and and just experiment with this. Go out here. Okay, I'd like to, I think, increase the pinch. Oh, look at that. You see, I never would have figured that out. I mean, I'm not going to ever live long enough to know what all these different possibilities are. But I like that way better than just the grid, so I'm going to go with it. And it's going to grind for a while. Yeah, and I like that. Now I'm going to take and click on move here and just kind of pull it around and to get it kind of centered the middle of the whirl. But that looks way better in a white background. Of course, I'm not really very artistic. I think any artistic DNA that I had, and it wasn't much, believe me, was pretty much stifled by Mr. Morgan in 7th grade. He was my art teacher, and he'd come to school. I mean, this is like during the late 60s, and he'd come to school with his white shirt and black tie. And what I'll never forget about Mr. Morgan was that instead of using a tie clip like everybody else did back in the 60s, he just stapled his tie to his shirt. And so with that kind of imagination, I think I was pretty much doomed. But in any event, there's my poster. It's not a thing of beauty, but I hope that I help clarify what some of these different tools are for when using text, and different ways that you can manipulate the pixels to get what I'm sure is a much better product. Okay. I know you thought you were probably headed out to go do something fun, but there's just one more thing that I wanted to show you. And it's just a subtle change on what we've done in the past. But I'm just going to go ahead and use my text tool. Draw across like so. Type in some letters. Scale them up. That's good enough. So now I'll take and use the magic wand here to come in and select these different sets of pixels. Come into paths, change the selection to a path, come back to my layers, take that layer of text and delete it because I don't really need it anymore. And what I'm going to do here is take and paste a picture in for the letters. And when I was teaching yearbook, this was a very popular thing to do. We would take and fill the letters with pictures of students. So I don't have any students to share, but I'm going to come in and open and grab this picture that I found, and then I'm going to grab a selection set here, relatively proportional to my letters. I'm going to copy it and then do what we did before and paste it as a new pattern. I'm going to call it Faces 4, and then come back to my original image, use the bucket fill tool. You can see that the pattern is already selected, and so I click inside there, and there you have it. I mean, it's not a big deal, but boy, when you really want something with some pop and something that the kids relate to, this is a great tool to be able to use. Okay, now I'm going to go away, I promise.